everybody, welcome to Alpha Discussion. This is episode 292, and tonight's part 3 of the PTK theme. So we already had 2 episodes. They went fairly well received, and tonight we're going to be focusing on the 12 methods. And we have Tuan Waid and Guro Ferd, and they're going to discuss that. And we're going to get both opportunities to go over that, as well as the second system, which was mentioned in the test run, the Contradas. So hopefully, folks, by the end of these theme episodes regarding PTK, folks will get a better understanding of PTK, and hopefully there'll be some resolve as far as people able to work together, particularly the students. It's kind of a shame when the students get caught up in this mess and they can't go cross-train and all that. I don't think that really benefits anybody. And it's been evidenced by, after I completed the colleagues Susumo theme episode, that people are starting to work together as students. And that's what it should be about. So they get better themselves, get better understanding. We're working with different instructors and all that. And hopefully that's one of the goals that's met upon conclusion of these theme episodes. And plus, you get a better understanding of PTK. And I know I will be. I hardly know anything. I've been some experience with the Tri-V formula, but that hardly constitutes me knowing much about PTK. So without further ado, I'm going to be bringing both these guys up. And so please, if you're watching, tell us where you're watching from, smash that like button, and we're going to get started. Hey guys, appreciate you. Thank you for coming on.
Glad to be here.
All right.
Good evening.
So Tuan's got his coffee. How about you, Ferd? You got anything that's going to keep
what
you?
I ran out to the kitchen to get. I'm like, oh wait, I'll get my coffee.
So you both got something to you guys awake and amplify you. All right. so yeah, I appreciate you guys coming on. This is gonna be great. When I was coming up with these theme episodes, I was trying to figure out, without really knowing the dynamics and players and who would be best suited to talk about what. And it was suggested that you guys were the chosen ones for the 12 methods. So I'm excited. I don't know much about the 12 methods other than hearing about them. So without that, we're going to get further ado. We're going to get started. So folks, this is Tuan Waid's first appearance. He's been well touted, and people have requested to get him on here. And thanks to Ferd for helping out with that. And folks, if you have not known, Ferd was on in the early days, episode 5, pre-COVID. So if you guys want to check that out, that's episode 5 with Guro Ferd. It seems like freaking ancient, so long
forever ago.
You know, but over 2 years. But nevertheless, he came on in the beginning when I was trying to find people that would come on, and so he volunteered. But so all right, Tuan Tim, just we were talking about, when did you first get started training in PTK, and why did you choose that system in particular?
So I started training in Philippine martial arts when I was in the Marine Corps. I was stationed in the Philippines and I did 3 years in Asia and a year in California, and then I went on terminal leave, and I went out and I went immediately back to the Philippines for a year to find a system. And specifically, I was looking for a blade fighting system because I mentioned a little bit last night when I was in the infantry as an infantry unit leader, and as you study strategy and tactics, which everybody should have a fundamental understanding of warfighting doctrine, because we use this. All martial art uses this, no matter what, whether empty hands or with a weapon base. But as I was looking at the requirements to be an effective combat leader and understanding this, capability is more important than a single ability. And of course, I was always interested in martial arts. I grew up training since I was about 11, but I actually stopped training when I went in because I couldn't do you can't do a sidekick very well with the rucksack on your back and a rifle, and so I was looking for something more effective, and I specifically looked at history to see if there was any martial art, because I didn't know actually that used their system within modern warfare. So within the turn of the century, but effectively as part of as a standardized part of their combat operations, and that was in the Philippines. The largest guerrilla unit in World War II the largest one in the Philippines was up in the north and east part of Luzon, and that was run by actually Colonel Russell Volkman, and another famous Army officer, Donald Blackburn. And at the end of when MacArthur came back into the Philippines, he actually rated that unit as equal to an Army division. In fact, he didn't have to send the units that were slated for that, all of them, because they were so effective as a unit. And my father-in-law actually was he was a member of those guerrilla units, and was my second teacher. So very effective. He had it was a 5-attack system. It's very interesting. He had tapping, and he also slapped as well. So that's very, very, very simple, but a very concise and a very effective. And everybody used it. Everybody used the bolo there, and that's pretty much the general experience across the island. So I said I have to learn this, so I immediately took terminal leave, saved up my time, and went right back to the Philippines for a year. And I actually stayed there and researching as many systems as I could. Got to meet a lot of the, if you will, all the grandmasters that were known within the Philippines at that time. And we're talking late '80s. We're talking '87.
Oh, they were all still alive. Okay.
Yeah. So Tatang Ilustrisimo, Jose Mina, Ben Lima, Ernesto Presas. I met several of the other smaller known grandmasters and authorities. Grandmaster Lanada, met him, trained with him. Of course, went to Cebu and trained with Doce with Grandmaster Juni Kenyeri, and I never had a chance to meet Grandmaster Momoy, but yeah, I went. I spent a year there, and actually, I didn't find what I was looking for, which is really a true bladed weapon system, and where they were actually using that, and it was apparent. And I really didn't even know what I was looking for, but I knew I would recognize it because of my military training and my tactics training, because we use the same fundamental strategy in fighting. It doesn't matter what type of fighting you're doing. It doesn't matter what type of weaponry, modern firearms to empty hands. But that's one thing unique about the Filipino martial arts, of course, is that truly we are the ones that teach weaponry first and empty hands last, because we do use the same mechanics organically. And once you learn the mechanics of the edge weapon, you have the mechanics for the impact weapon. Once you learn the mechanics of the long weapon of the sword, you have the mechanics for every other weapons category. And that good segue into the system of Paquita Tertia, which is the Doce Methdos and the Contradas. And so the Doce Methdos is learned with the single sword, single baston, single impact weapon. And from that, so you learn the 12 methods, which I talked about last night, identifies all the tactics, identifies fighting by timing, fighting by range, and fighting by advanced manipulation, and then disarming and grappling. Good entire system. And then, but once you learn that with the single long weapon, that is the framework for all of the weapons categories. You don't have to learn all the other weapons categories as a separate system like some are trained. You're doing the same mechanics, for instance, like Panastasungkete, which is linear slashing and thrusting. Well, there's a pattern of attack that you learn for in double sword or double impact weapon, but it's the same characteristics. It's the same attack. You're just using two weapons, and of course, it's a pattern where the weapons work together, but you're accomplishing the same tactics. So, again, it's a very scientific system, and it's when you look at this, and there are other systems in the Philippines that are formulated similarly, and but it's all by purpose. It's all by grand design. I mean, there's a lot of scientific work that went into this system, and it works. It's progressive, just like a true functional scientific system is, and it served me well. But I didn't. I had to go to the Philippines and train with Grand Tuan for 5 years to learn this, actually, because I spent like 6 years training with as many instructors as I could, and while they were all I learned from all of them, but I wasn't getting the essence of the system. And I'd met Grant Tuan in 1988. Actually, I came back from the Philippines, and I met him within like 6 months from my teacher, Mike Goldberg in Fort Worth here, and he had been a student of Grant Tuan in Houston, and so we actually went over to we went to El Paso and did a demo with Grant Tuan, and met him there and started training with him immediately. But he left the States, went back to the Philippines around 90, early 1990, and then I followed in early 93, and I've been staying there, and so I live about half the year in the Philippines and half the year here.
Wow. How about you, Guro, Ferd? What, if I recall correctly from the interview, and gosh, it was over 2 years ago, you dabbled in something before you jumped to PTK, if I'm correct.
Correct. Yeah.
So what got you there, and what was the attraction, and when?
So I'm not going to go all the way back to when I first started martial arts.
Just for sure.
But I'll start from my first exposure to Filipino martial arts, which was through Grandmaster Ray Galang.
Yeah.
The Bakbakan group. He had a school in Lodi, New Jersey at the time when I was, I was kind of still in art school. And, I trained there for a little bit, until I ran out of money and couldn't afford, classes anymore. And I basically just, whenever I could, I tried different styles of martial arts. So I did a little bit of Hungar Kung Fu as well. I even took a little bit of Muay Thai. But, again, they didn't last very long. But fast forward a little bit, when I moved to Chicago, I found out about Guro Nate Defensor.
Yeah.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, Guro Nate, he had a system called the Defensor Method. So it's like it's a blend of Pikiti Tertia, Inosanto system, Silat, right? There's a bunch of other styles in there, and that's kind of the first time I heard the term Pikiti Tertia. But I kind of put that out of my mind because first it sounded weird, and at the time I didn't really know any better. I just know that okay, I'm doing stick fighting, right? But then I moved to California and started training at a Jeet Kune Do school in Mountain View, and got reintroduced to the Inosanto system. And I remember, there were times where my Sifu was teaching certain drills, and he tries to reference the root system it came from, and I guess at the time we just seemed to be doing a lot of material that came from Pikiti Tertia. So he kept saying it, and I'm like, I remember this term from Guro Nate way back. So I started looking it up, and I'm like, what the heck is Pikiti Tertia Kali anyway? And started seeing videos about it. Found my first teacher in Pikiti Tertia Kali, Mike Scheimer in San Francisco. So, kind of just got hooked into it. I was kind of on the verge of quitting martial arts altogether, because I wasn't really seeing. I don't know. I wasn't seeing much progress. Even though I was very dedicated to training, and the things seemed just to be like all over the place. And I'm a visual learner, so if I'm being shown like too many complicated things, I just kind of lose interest. So I needed to learn something a little bit more streamlined that focuses on foundations. foundation skill development. So when I started training with Mike Scheimer, that's exactly what I got. A lot of conditioning exercises, a lot of body mechanics drills, and yeah, a couple of years later, I met Tuhon Tim Waid at a seminar that I begrudgingly agreed to attend. So here's this thing about me: if you keep telling me to do something over and over, I tend to like push back and not want to do it. And that's what my teacher was doing for several months. Just kept telling me about this guy, Tim Waid. You know, he's awesome. Yeah, you got to train with him. We're bringing him up for a seminar, and I'm kind of like, yeah, okay. You know, I don't have the money, whatever. I came up with all kinds of excuses, and I met Tim finally like on his second trip, because he did like 2 seminars that summer, I believe, and I got him. I met him on the second trip. So, yeah. Long story short, yeah. After I met him, I just decided to stick with it, keep training in the system. Even though I was already training with other instructors like Tuan Rommel. We met actually, Tuan Phil. We brought to the Bay a couple of times. Well, Chagrin Tuan, obviously, but when we started training with Tim, we kind of noticed that like he has a very specific way of doing and explaining things. So since then, we just kind of we just stuck with it, and we're still training it till now.
That's great, and we got folks already jumping in. So yes, if you're watching, tell us if you're watching. We got Gilman, we got Alvin from California, Tom from Maryland.
Tuan Phil is on there. Hey, Tuan Phil.
Tuan Phil, yeah. Speak of the devil.
Hey.
Tuan Phil. And Mark Stewart. Crazy Mark. So we're going to get into, I want to get into, again, we're going to be covering mostly, the 12 methods and some other stuff, Sagitas and all that. But I want to just show this vid, and you can kind of just, after we're done, Tim, you can kind of just tell us about it and the importance thereof. So hopefully folks can see this. Let me hide it. Why is it not here? Let me just gotta hide it here. Oop. Hold on, hang with me there. For whatever reason, it's not playing. Hold on here.
Are you only able to screen share from the host side?
Oh no, I can definitely. Right now, I'm just trying to get to play. I'm not sure why it's. Hold on here. It should be going. I'm just not sure why it's not. I might have to hold on here. I can get it going. I'm just going to have to pick it up again from my YouTube. But yeah, no worries. Here it's coming right up now. Here we go. All right, share, copy link. All right, there we go. Sorry for that, folks. Sometimes things stick and they won't play. But here we go. All right. Okay.
In other words, when we work out here, throw broken one, left 45 and then 1. You want to put that in front of that hand as close as you can without hitting it. You see this? You got it. You see that? No, you don't. You realize that. Because guess what? You're just hitting sticks all day. Don't let 45 and hit my stick. Guess what? You never hit the ring. Ever. You just never do it. Because you're not training. You're targeting stick. Guess what? You're not going to read the direction. So the training that you broke one,
So I want to ask you about that. I see a lot of stick, and I just found when I was looking through your YouTube page, and I'm like, wow, this is interesting on, for different reasons. And one being that a lot of these systems do click sticks, and I get it. They're, used to contact, whatever, and other various reasons. But what I really appreciate about the video, your explanation, how like, the hand and all that. So, what say you on the vid?
Well, it's actually very important, and it's interesting. Again, because of my background and because of my professional training, I only do things one way, and that's the correct way. I mean, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to commit to it. I'm a professional instructor and teacher, and people come to us, all of us, to learn protective skill. I mean, that's a reality. We're talking about lethal skill, because if you don't have the ability to execute lethal force, then you really don't have the ability to protect yourself, no matter where you are, no matter what you're able to carry or not, weapons or no. And but you have to have that capability. So, of course, what you're teaching, you have to be committed that it's correct and it's effective. And so one thing I knew, that's why I took my time and effort to find a true blade fighting system, because I knew that if they still existed, which, a lot of them have died out. Look at many of the European systems. I mean, they're trying to resurrect. They're writing books how to interpret the manuals to try and figure out how to fight. Which in reality, it's very simple actually. I really don't understand some of their method and their approach, but it's because we do it. And like I said last night, all blade fighting systems come to the same conclusion around the world. They have their excuse me, stylistic approach or cultural approach, depending upon the culture and location and so forth. But a one is a one, and a lot of the methods are all the same. The geometry is all the same. So, but the reason why, so when you, and this is something that is very important. So you look at a system, the training, the striking mechanics, how you attack, and your movement, which is equal and which is as important as striking. That the way that you drill, because drills teach you how to fight. I don't know, other people say they're drills for this or that, but believe me, drills teach you how to fight. Drills are pieces of arranged combat engagement, combat striking, and counter striking, exactly the way that you fight. It's structured in a drill so that you can learn these patterns and realistically apply them over time, and then you adjust them into a more realistic method, which means you actually range the drill out, because real fights don't start in range of contact. Real fights start with a distance, with what we call the bridge. You have to bridge. And a lot of people have come to me over the years simply for that particular skill set right there, because a lot of people they didn't know how to bridge. They didn't know how to enter into close quarter without being hit. And, it's the same as a gunfight. It's the same as when you're executing small unit tactics. The number one thing you don't do is you don't get shot and you don't get stabbed, because there's no training for that. So you should never train to be hit, actually. And so eventually all of your timing has to go into offense. You learn counteroffense first, equal it, and then you learn offensive. And again, many times over the year, people would come and train with me, and I'd say, hey, how's it going? I'd say, get some background on them and so forth. But I would ask them one question. I would say, okay, but can you show me an attack? And it stumped a lot of people, because what are they used to? Most people, because most martial arts, again, unfortunately, is based upon them being attacked first and then doing technique off of that. That's the abecedarial method, which is, it's a fundamental way of teaching, but you're still behind time, and you should be the one attacking, or you should be at least attacking equal with that protection. So, but again, this is the information, and this is the essence of what I got training with Grand Tuhon directly, and why I committed to that, and why I was very, very fortunate to have the experience that I did. But so again, your mechanics, the way that you learn how to strike and move, the drills and the sparring has to look all the same. Should be no difference. I mean, otherwise, the system that you're supposedly training, because that's the only way. I mean, these systems perpetuated and stayed in existence. So when we're striking to the hand like that, And because we pick up the live blade, and you can see some of the videos on my YouTube channel with the live blade as well. We're doing the same thing. You come as close to the hand without hitting it. And that's when you know that you can actually take that hand, because if you get there, then all you need is what? Extension of the arm, slight, maybe a wave in, extension of the foot, any or all of those combined, and we know that we can take the hand. And same thing with the contact of the weapon. Yes, there is contact with the weapon, but the indicator, the number one indicator that you are advanced in skill is that there's no more contact weapon to weapon, because you can actually manipulate around that. But, again, as we were talking about last night, the Doce Methdos system is the system of contact. You learn power-based striking, because that's fundamental to almost every sword system, because you have to learn to protect yourself directly with the weapon. And it's power-based. There's only 3 methods of fighting. Okay? There's attrition, which is power-based. There's maneuver, which is maneuver to a position of advantage and a time and advantage. And then there's deception. So, all systems have some type of faking motion, right?
Yeah,
so,
right.
And you're actually using all 3 of them, in concert. But if one system has only attrition, where it's only force on force, well, you're at a big disadvantage, But that's what the fundamentals of fighting is based upon, because when it comes down to it, if you're in confined space and you can't move, or you can move only a small space, then what do you have to do? You have to attack. You have to attack the attack, and that's the skill set that we bring everybody to. So that type of precision, is very important. And unfortunately, some people do. They say, well, they hit the stick, and they say, well, I'm really hitting the hand. Well, that's not actually. If you're hitting the stick, you won't be able to hit my hand, actually, because it's hard to adjust if you're not targeting the hand directly. So.
Well,
but that's for that specific training method. And when that's Largo for us, because we're attacking with that, and when you're targeting like that, you can strike with full speed and power, and that's what you're doing. And of course, it takes some time to develop that skill, but that's what keeps us. That's why we never have any plateau, because we're keeping that type of skill set. And it never goes away, never plateaus.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Ferd, anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, as I mentioned yesterday regarding the Doce Methdos system, it allows you to kind of look at every tactic in its own neat little box, where you can simply just isolate that specific principle, train it in all its available variations, and then try to combine it with another principle, right? So what we're talking about, like flowing from one principle to another, or transitioning from one principle to another. In the past, like people ask me, like, how come we don't train in 64 attacks, but how come we know the 64 attacks form? And I used to reply, like, well, it's essentially the same principles. It's just that in 64 attacks, it's just strung together, all the way from method number 1 all the way to 12. I guess the exception is
just like you said, Ferd, that's very important what you said, because I learned that so many ways. I must have learned that about 12 different ways, at least. Yeah. I mean, at least, and with minor variations. But so the problem with that was that because they weren't broken down in the methods, there was no explanation of what the purpose of the drill was, what the purpose of the attack was. We just did it, and there's no reason, no understanding of specifically why and how. Yeah. With Doce Methdos, it's all there to identify.
Yeah, and it also wasn't Dean. It wasn't actually taught to us in a linear fashion either. Like, it wasn't taught to us by Tim. Okay, I'm going to teach you Abecedario first, and then I'm going to teach you Four Wall next, and then Payong next. In fact, the first thing we started off was Method 5, the Tertia Corto principle. Within Tertia Corto principle, you have the five attack system, the break and break out, and basically learning how to utilize the bridging footwork.
So a little bit of history on that, on why the 64 attacks ever came in existence. Very simple. Grand Tuan started teaching in New York City in 1972, and there was, there was him, and I think he was actually the first one in public. There may have been another gentleman, I'm not sure, but and then there was on the West Coast there was Grandmaster of Terado,
Cabalas?
Yeah, Grandmaster Cabalas. So supposedly he's like one of the first ones to open up a school on the West Coast.
Right here.
In the 70s, that's right. So a lot of people didn't know what Filipino martial arts were, and what were the majority of the students coming from? They were coming from, probably mostly from, karate or Korean or Japanese martial arts, Okinawan martial arts. So they knew forms. So Grand Tuan, to bridge the gap, into something that they could do and pick up on in a method they were familiar with. He just linked together the drills and some of the drills and some of the forms from the 12 methods and put them into 64 attacks. So in other words, and you could do a string of mechanics, which it's effective if you know what you're doing it for. But so it served a purpose during the time in the 70s when that was the student base. That's
what makes sense. It's like what Preston did when he came over here.
Yeah.
That's why he was so successful getting into the traditional schools like Kempo and everything. He modified it to fit them. So I never knew that about the 64 ways attacks. That was basically, wow, that's so interesting.
The only thing missing from the 64 attacks form is the seguidas, because that's actually like its own series of principles. The principle of continuous center line / follow-up attacks.
Wow,
but
wow, that is
so often you'll see probably any given PTK tertiary practitioners doing these kind of 45-degree striking, flourishes and whatnot, and then once in a while you might see this kind of short jab out
type.
That's pretty universal across different FMA styles. It's just that ours belongs in a specific category, right? So seguidas is we consider the advanced principle, because you're no longer doing these big wide arcing strikes, right? Because the idea is by the time you start to utilize any seguidas type of strategy, is you've taken care of the weapon hand. You've put him you put your opponent in a compromised position or whatever, right? You have the advantage and you're just simply finishing him off. Of course, there are counters as well, because they might still be flailing or still trying to attack you, right? So it still has some of that, but the primary tactic or strategy behind the seguidas is to be all offense. And in fact, that's how the Doce Methdos is structured. It's structured according to timing. It's a behind timing, and then you get to the middle, it's equal, and then after that, everything's ahead, right? Because basically, by this stage, you should know how to set the other guy up.
Let's get into the 12, because this was about. So we can go about this a couple of ways. I want to both give you a crack at answering. So we could do, you guys identify the first one, you guys speak on it, and we'll go kind of 1 through 12.
Yeah, well, the very first method is obviously abecedario, right? In fact, sometimes it's referred to as panguna, literally the first form. So your abecedarios, you have your typical 12 count attacks or strikes, but our abecedario is not specifically meant to address angles of attacks. There are angles of strikes there, obviously, but it's primarily for target identification, and basically like within this line, what are all the targets you're going to hit within that same line, versus just constantly changing direction and whatnot, right? So it just gives you a very kind of basic I guess you could say template of like all the things you can hit, like on a high line horizontal, and forehand and backhand, and then the midline and low and all that stuff. And then there's the other half of method one, which is what we call the multiple attack system. So that's where you start to get introduced to all the different energies behind the strikes. So that's where you will first see for example, the jabs and the jab takedowns that you see in the beginning of Seguidas. So some of these fundamental strikes, that you've been introduced to it in a more advanced form, it circles back to the beginning. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about method one. There's
so that's good. Let me give an overview, because that'll put everything in perspective as we go and break each one of them down. So
sure.
Method one is obsidian, and like Ferd was saying, it's for us, it's how we target the opponent. It's not a schematic that covers a whole body, that's kind of balanced like many FMA systems. Nothing wrong with that. We have that in our other forms and methods of attack, actually. But for instance, like our 1, 2, and 3, 4 are actually horizontal strikes across the temple and across the elbow. And very simple, but when we say we're going to take your eyes out, then we're going to do that because the eye can be hit from the side if you're striking the weapon on a horizontal. If you're striking on a downward diagonal, your eyes are actually protected by your brow, by your skull. But on the horizontal, we can take the eyes out, and that is the strategy when you're attacked with a bladed weapon. It's very simple. If you're attacked with a bladed weapon, you're in a bladed weapon fight, then you have to take their eyes out. That's the number one strategy. Exactly taught by my teacher, by Tuhon Guy. And that's what the real bladed fight is about. So our method identifies exactly how that we're going to do that, and that's done effectively on a horizontal. But again, that's so it's our way that we target the body, and then there are thrusts in there as well, and different type of angular attacks. But the 3 thrusts, and like most systems have. And then the other part is what we call the multiple attacks. So that's the 3 energies: broken, fluid, and circular, which the only thing you can do with your, that manipulation of the weapon, broken, fluid, circular. And then there it identifies the angles, which there are only 3: diagonal, horizontal, vertical, right? Regardless of wherever the target is, there are only 3 angles of attack. So that's what abecedario was for. So again, like Ferd said, you learn these because you learn a jab, then you learn a jab takedown, then a slash crosses the center line. Then you learn an overhead, which is a circular uppercut, close spacing. So again, this sets you up, again, another indication of a scientific system, because now you have all the angles and in one striking pattern, which is the multiple attacks, and you do that forehand and backhand. And these are very precise. I mean, these are with precision. We just don't throw the weapon out there like that. Even when we're using the impact weapon, the stick, we're still having the blade edge orientation when you're doing the jab, because that's what the line edge of the sword. So that's our abecedario. And the second and third method is the counterfeits method, which is our 4-wall and umbrella. So 4-wall is nothing but diagonal attacks, except you're doing it while you're sidestepping because you're behind time. So therefore, when you're being attacked, what are you going to do? You're going to displace, move your body, and place your weapon where your torso was. Because you don't have any understanding of timing. You have you're a brand new student. You have no understanding of what timing is all about. So that's why you do that. And then, so that counters horizontal and diagonal strikes. And then method 3, the umbrella, will also counter the vertical, and of course the diagonal and horizontal as well. So those are the 2 counteroffense, and it's one of them has a drill, and one of them has just a form that you go through and shows the different positions. But we don't consider that 4-wall a combat drill, because actually when you understand what you're doing, That's just a diagonal attack. That just becomes a diagonal attack when you understand how to now equal the timing of your opponent and how to strike force on force. You don't sidestep anymore, because if you're sidestepping, you're not going anywhere. You can't fight sidestepping because you're not going anywhere, right? You're staying on the 90-degree line instead of moving forward or displacing reverse. That's why we also call this the triangle system, because the triangle system is 80% of the fight, which is diagonal attacks and 45-degree footwork. That's what we call a triangle system. Half diamond, forward triangle, reverse triangle. Once you're trained, you're not going to use much 90-degree stepping unless you need to, because again, you're not changing your distance. You're on the same distance.
Yeah, just because you turn 90 doesn't mean you move from the threat. I mean,
if that's all you have to move, only direction and only space, well, of course you're going to use it, but it's not advantageous, that's for sure. So that's the two methods of behind timing. And then now the fourth method is Doce Puño, which is the first method of attack, and it's actually a finishing a strike, but it's the horizontal puño. So you're actually striking with the blade edge close to the guard, closest to the guard here. You're actually striking in a horizontal manner in close quarter. There's the thrust first, and then you come up into the horizontal puño. And this is it's actually the most difficult drill to do correctly. If you know how to do it and the energies are right, because it's got power and it's got speed, and it's also got sensitivities. And see, this is why the Doce Method is so important, because when you understand what the name of each of the methods are, the name identifies the tactic specifically. Doce Puño means grab and puño. So you're in close quarter, and what this drill does is it actually has all parts of abecedario, forewall, and umbrella, and the thrusts, which bring it all together into a very advanced drill, close quarters, but it has forewall and umbrellas, both of them, from forehand and backhand, and all three thrusts. And it also gives you a phenomenal skill with your left hand, with the tapping, and all throughout the entire schematic of the drill. And there's a lot there, but it's also power-based, because there's a lot of power in the horizontal puño. And that's also our finishing attack. Once we take the hand or get a strike to the body and disable the person, then you're going to do a center line thrust, and you're going to come up and finish from horizontal with a blade strike in the horizontal, not in a diagonal. If you have a sword, you're certainly not going to use the puño of a sword, right? You're going to use the bladed edge on the closest to the guard. So, but that is also what is called the abecedario system. Those four methods, because it all comes together in the abecedario drill. And again, when you see these things, it's like, wow, these people are geniuses. I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, I spent half my life in the Philippines, actually. So I definitely, what you say, a Filipino advocate, right? I appreciate, the uniqueness of their culture. And of course, I've been all over the world, so I appreciate all cultures, and, everywhere I go, and because everybody has a unique, contribution, and unique contribution in history. Sure. But it's really fascinating. I mean, when you see a real scientific system like this and how effective, and just the thought process. And Tuan told me about this. He talked about it. He had obviously been taught by his grandfather, and his grandfather told him about, the training and that this was a family system, and only the family learned it, those within the family circle. And because again, if you understand the sugar centrals and the way that the sugar industry works in Negros, which is the principal agricultural crop, and it's the heart of the whole island. But everybody had their own plot of land, and everybody worked that as a family unit, and therefore you had to protect that as well. And that's why how these family systems were developed and perpetuated. And it did not go out of the family system. It didn't go out of the family circle, actually. So a lot of these things that again, people don't understand that after World War II, people didn't want to stay in the province and learn Filipino martial arts and They wanted to go to the city and go to school, college, industrialization, take advantage of all the opportunities. So plenty of systems died out, and they just didn't have anybody to carry it forward.
Perpetuate them on, sadly.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Guro Ferd, how about 12, number 4 and 5? What do you,
Going back to the copy.
5 and 6, actually. 5 and 6.
5 and 6.
5 and 6, yeah. So 5, method 5, as I mentioned, is the tertia corto principle, and 6 is the tertia largo principle. Method 5
here. Is this is my screen still?
You're moving.
Okay.
I see you. Yeah. So sorry. So method 5 is unfortunately misunderstood by a lot of people. They often attribute it to just simply the 5 attacks subsystem or 5 attack system. 5 attacks is one of the components of it. Break and break out is the other one. So if you look at the name again, as Tuhon has already indicated, the way things are named actually refers to the principle itself. So the principle for 5 is tertia corto, meaning close quarter fighting or close range fighting. Right now, that doesn't mean that you start up close already. It actually means that you gotta know how to work your way to close quarters and be able to maneuver. So this is where the bridging footwork is taught. 5 attacks is obviously taught. There's the fluid 5 attacks, and then there's broken 5 attacks, because you have to know both. You have to know how to deliver the strikes both in its fluid energy and broken energy. Especially broken energy, because you need to understand broken energy, because that's how you learn how to go into contradas later.
One of the specifics about the tertia corto is that, and again, a lot of even PTK instructors don't know this, but a corto strike is where it's a weapon-to-weapon contact strike on the diagonals that is close quarter. I'm actually attempting to step and displace you. I'm actually striking through you and not to you. So when you make contact and protect yourself with the weapon, I'm actually going to hit you on the follow through, because if I do the corto strike properly, and my bridge is sufficient enough, and even though you may attempt to range out, I still have the distance on it. Once the weapons pass, I will hit you on the follow through. That is the range of a true corto strike. So if it's not in their range, and again, you don't get this every time you attempt it, but that's the purpose of it, because there's no protection against that. You can't, if you don't have any footwork and you're not able to protect yourself distance in that type of attack, well, then I've hit you. So and that's, and you're not going to, and see, so you understand very quickly again. There's no more full wall, because now you need to meet the weapons directly or simply strike to strike. Right. And the importance of footwork. Force the other guy out. Yeah. If you have no footwork, then it's going to be a short day, actually, short event. But that's what a corto strike is. That will hit you on the
tertia corto also. Yeah, tertia corto also teaches you how to basically strike and step simultaneously. So it's very common in FMA where players will do some kind of footwork step, establish that step, and then do some kind of strike or attack, or they'll strike first and then the feet follow. We can do that, but we can also do simultaneous, meaning while I'm in transit, I'm also attacking while I'm in transit. I don't have to hit a point or leave stay at a point, deliver my attack, and then transport myself to another point. I can do that while I'm coming after you, basically. So this is where the whole the kind of the very hit and run. Visually, it looks like a very hit and run type of fighting, because you have to maneuver, right? You have to move. and that takes obviously some specific kind of conditioning. But that's what Method 5 will teach you. It'll teach you how to properly at a diagonal angle where you can not only deliver an offensive strike or a counter-offensive strike in case you're behind timing, but also be able to protect yourself behind your weapon. So this is where the 45-degree angle is often emphasized quite a bit. Sorry, Tim, you were saying?
I was going to, when you see us train that drill, like Fluid 5 attacks, which, is one of the most, if all I could do is that drill, I would have full still confidence in my fighting ability. In fact, if you can attack with just those diagonal attacks, then you're actually good to go, because, well, you also learn that diagonals are the one angle that you can protect yourself and target your opponent from long range in a close quarter. Horizontals are obviously used for long range, and verticals mostly for close. But diagonals have that ability to both protect you high to low, one side of the body to the other, long range in a close quarter. But when we do that drill, you'll see us make contact, and we're always driving close. But two things will happen. So in the beginning, we'll stop that and let you follow through. So just to show that, okay, you can see that you were hit. Or once you understand that, then many times we're just flowing and we're following through, but we don't stop anymore. But both of us know that, whether we're caught in that range with our training partners follow through. So we don't have to stop and, make them point or anything, because we already know that fluidly. And the purpose of training that is so you get more repetitions and you're getting the proper bridging and attacks long range in a close quarter. But before, someone had commented watching this and like, well, you're not doing anything. I'm like, what are you talking about?
All you
don't understand the method. Say again?
All you do is teach 5 attacks. That's all you do.
Yeah. Well, that's it's quite it definitely serves as your aerobic capability. If you can do that like we do, then you'll definitely be in shape. I can assure you. But it's just interesting, and again, that's why we have to. It's why it's good that we have forums like this so we can share these type of information, and everybody can learn, because everybody has some type of unique training method, and I've learned from everywhere I go still, like I was mentioning last night. I look at the similarities of the systems, not the differences. There's always a way to, whether I'm looking for how do you get there? How do you control the distance? How do you control the timing? And, how do they execute it offensively, with pattern recognition? Those are the 3 skills that you need to be able to effectively apply any martial art. You have to control the distance. You control it. You have to control the timing, and you obviously have to have pattern recognition to be able to, to keep yourself safe and then bridge and then strike your opponent in close quarters. So.
Right.
Yeah, actually, interesting enough, Tim, you remember? I think we had this conversation, right? So the first time, going back to Dakop y Puño, Method 4, the first time I actually saw Dakop y Puño, at least the pattern, was in Santo's system. But it's not called Dakop y Puño. It was simply, I think it was just called Puño Sombrada.
Puño Sombrada, yeah.
Puño Sombrada, right? Okay, yeah.
So when my teacher introduced me to Dakop y Puño as how we would train it, I immediately was like, wait a minute, like I know this. The main difference though was there was not a lot of over emphasis on that would take when you go vertical, and you would take and you catch the hand and stuff. Instead, the emphasis was the forewall and using your forearm to basically stop the momentum of the other guy's puño strike. So you're not just like simply would take and then you catch and then you bring it around and you go round robin. So right there, I noticed that, when we do, like you're supposed to do anyway, the way you're supposed to train Dakop y Puño is you really have to have some intent behind that strike. So if you're planning to deliver a thrust to that midsection for the first movement, you gotta drive it towards their center line, towards their belly button. You can't be like overly nice and kind of like let thrust out to the outside simply because you want them to tap it and go to the next movement. You have to threaten your partner enough to force him to actually step out of the way. So the footwork is heavily emphasized. Like you can't just do this exchange with your hands and try to be fast, try to overtake each other. You have to, if you're supposed to, get off the X like it's commonly mentioned in martial arts circles, you really have to get off that X. You really do have to sidestep or step it on a diagonal, and then but not overstep enough where you lose the opportunity to do the proper counter to your attacker. And so yeah, speaking just because Tim was talking about like the similarities, that's where I saw, okay, the patterns are the same. The emphasis though is very different.
Right. So again, for us, that initial engagement is power based because this horizontal puño is extremely powerful, and therefore you need this close quarter forewall to counter that. So, but I can tell you again, going back to my experience, I learned that I didn't learn that correctly until I trained with Grand Tuan, because even in Pikiti circles they called it stick tapping. So it was actually just you were going through the motions, and it sounded like stick tapping, and but that's not it. I mean, we adjust the different energies and the different ranges. Again, you range that drill out eventually, and then there's so many different applications. I mean, it's unlimited. Actually, it's a phenomenal drill, and but there's a right way of fundamentally developing and executing that drill. And if you don't have that, well, I mean, you just simply, you're missing a big part of the system. I mean, you don't have the base of effectivity that you need and to understand how to both attack and counter in close quarters like that. So again, this is all my own experience. Again, I knew that this wasn't correct, and although many times I didn't understand why, but it's just fundamentally I'm like, we're not doing anything here. I mean, nothing's happening here. There's no real exchange. There's no real displacement, and that's one of the things that that people need. If you're trying to evaluate something, if two people are demonstrating something but they're not moving, this is not realistic. And if you're learning mechanics, if you're learning mechanics, that's one thing. But if you're doing a drill, you're learning how to fight, and you can't be standing still.
Moving. Yeah,
so
he should be moving.
And if this is a partner drill, really both training partners should be able to get something out of the drill, right? Not just like simply one guy standing there while the other guy goes through a series of, complicated, and then he just kind of stands there and waits for you to finish.
Yeah.
Right. You seldom ever would see us do that. And funny enough, sometimes we get criticized for it, but whatever. When Tim is doing a drill with you, of course, it'll be shown slow first so that you understand the mechanics and recognize the where the weapon is and where it's going. And there'll be times where there'll be no footwork involved. It's just, okay, we're just going to focus on the hand movements. Okay, you get that? Okay, now you're going to combine it with some rudimentary bridging footwork. So, little by little, right? He's not going to, I know people watch our videos and they see us just darting across the screen all over the place. Like, that's how we always do things. It's like, no, there are times where, we can stop, do the attack, and then take off again. Like, we're not always just, like race cars zooming all over the place, but that's part of, when we're training, that's part of the training because it is conditioning, right? It's an anaerobic conditioning. So you need to learn how to be able to move explosively and basically regulate your energy, right? So you're not fast. Like after 30 seconds,
Yeah, you're wiped out.
Ready, right? So, again, there's a lot of similarities. The way the others are training is just we take it a step further, so to speak. So you're not just always standing in front of each other and just like Tim said, doing stick tapping. Yeah. Even in the system, you notice, okay, right? I said tertia corto, and then I went to tertia largo. You notice that I didn't say tertia medio or medium range, right? Because that's not an area that we want to play in. We don't want to play in or fight in a mutual destruction range. You're either at a long range, or you're either at the largo safe range, or you're up close where you are overwhelming your opponent, right? The analogy I sometimes use is imagine two armies on opposite sides of a body of water, like a river, right? They have to decide, both of them have to decide if they're going to fight long range from their side of the bank,
right, or they're charging.
Develop some kind of system or strategy to cross that body of water to the other side so that they can overwhelm this other guys, right? Yeah. At no point did these guys go, you know what, let's go in the middle of that river and duke it out.
Both nail each other.
Yeah, and then watch their horses get carried away by
It's a good analogy. No,
right?
It's a good analogy.
So it's kind of it's the same idea where we are the way the training is. It's you're constantly calculating where you need to be and how to position yourself there to, hopefully, effectively fight, right? But the whole concept of fighting in medium range is kind of it's very misunderstood. It's in Pikiti Tertia, that's not something you're supposed to be doing, although you often see a lot of partner drills where that's where it takes place. They're just stick to stick, they're doing disarms, and again, it's if you're trying to introduce a concept or principle and you want to just strip it down to its bare bones, let's say, or just the hand techniques, then that's what you'll do. Right, if like the Iponyo, for instance, right? I mean, the first time I learned it, because I had to understand the whole thrust, tap, and then the puño, right, and then exiting out of that. The way my teacher introduced it to us, there was like no footwork first, and it was like he did it in a kind of as a warm up. And then right after that, he taught us the form proper with the correct way of stepping, because there's no partner involved. We're going through the motions. But okay, when you finish this low line thrust, number one, you're supposed to step to the left. You're going to pretend that you're going to slap or tap the other guy's arm so that you can deliver that forehand puño. But you have to. You have to move in that direction and then do the hand technique and then do what follows, right? So every instructor breaks it down, in different ways, and that's how we did it. And then later you have to be able to flow into that from.
That's why. So if I can interject there, that's why to have the terminology and to have the understanding. That's why the methods were formed this way, because. That's right. As an instructor, you can approach teaching of that method in many different ways. I mean, we don't train instructors to be like robots and regurgitate some type of script, because again, this is the art. This is the artistic application of the system, but the fundamental is that you understand the tactic that's being accomplished, and you understand the fundamentals of the drill, which are correct and must be taught. From that, again, you can approach that. If someone is having a problem with a particular mechanic, then of course you stop them from moving and have them work on the striking mechanics, which is the way you learn in the beginning. We do footwork first, then striking mechanics, then we combine them. So again, the instructor has a ability to approach it different ways, but and as I have always said, and it's true, whether someone's trained, a month or a decade, if you follow my instructions and teaching, because I'm teaching the authentic system, and I know that it is correct. If you follow the system, you'll be teaching correctly always. I mean, I have full confidence on all the people that I'm training and that I've trained over the years, because I tell them that. I mean, all you must do is teach the system according as it's been developed, and you will be effective. I mean, without a doubt. And of course, you have that ability to. Your approach is, you could emphasize one point over another in the beginning. I mean, like I said, we're not doing some, robotic type of regurgitation.
Right.
Yeah.
But,
and that's to me, this is what's interesting about the structure of Doce Methdos is, they're all fundamental principles, but you can expand on them. You can start adding things. For instance, again, just using Dakop Ipunyo as an example, there's a standard set of movements that you learn first, and you learn how to do that without the footwork. You learn to do it with the footwork as a solo form, and then you learn to do it as a partner drill. And like I said, you learn to also flow into that from another principle, like 5 attacks. Usually we use 5 attacks as a way to transition to that. But then there's things like adding the thrusting lines in the Kopi Punyo, like the 8 and 9 thrusts, for instance, in the flow itself, right? But you don't show that first, right? You show that after that person has have some understanding of the principle of Dakop Ipunyo at a fundamental level, right? So yeah, you can and you can start adjusting things. Like I said, first time I learned Dakop Ipunyo was, instead of that 4 wall, we were being taught the Witek to the hand and then catching, doing an outside pass and circling it out of the way, right? So you can certainly do that, if you take certain things into consideration, like, okay, yeah, I can't do the 4 wall because my arm is pinned. I will then use the Witek to blast the hand, and then I will shoot my left hand to attempt to gain control of that weapon hand, right? So, it's not just something you do because, Sifu so-and-so taught it to me this way, and therefore I'm just going to regurgitate what I was taught. Tim kind of challenges you to analyze that particular movement a little further and see what else is there. And if you just can't figure it out, then he'll show you. Without overwhelming your brain with like too much information,
So what?
Again, that's what I liked about this approach, because I started in Tri-V, and none of us could make any sense of what was being shown to us. It wasn't until we started doing Doce Methdos, and after some time, I'm finding that I can flow with anybody. I can flow with a Tri-V person. I can flow with a person.
You have a good
background. Because it doesn't matter. Yeah. Okay. And I actually a couple of years ago I found that I could flow with a Terado guy. So Terado guy will do his patterns, and I will reference whatever I learned from.
You're able to
Methdos and respond to whatever he's giving me. I don't see him on here. That's Guro Norm Malonzo in San Diego. I met him a few years ago, and we're just playing, And you were like, "Oh, like what is that? What did you do there?" I'm like, "Oh, that's the backhand punyo from a form we call Dakop Ipunyo," and then and that's how we were doing our sharing, so to speak.
So
so he was like, "Oh yeah, in our system we call it this, and it looks like this," So yeah, it's kind of cool because even though I'm doing something super basic, to him it was kind of like, his mind was kind of blown because it's like they're so similar. It's just
saw the reference.
Yeah, we just categorized it different, or we just have a different term for it, but essentially like the idea behind that principle is like almost the same. So it's kind of cool, you know. But going back to Doce and Methdos, where were we at? Tercio Largo?
We just finished that way. I was going to have perhaps.
So yeah. So really quick, yeah, Tercio Largo, that's addressing quartering from long range, which we kind of talked about already. Right? You have to understand how to negotiate distance from long range in order to move to close range, right?
So what you're doing on that on Tercio Corto, you're coming in direct and you're taking the space of your opponent. You're actually driving through them, and but on Tercio Largo, you are the hand is the principal target, and you are striking to that both offensively and counteroffensively, and but you must keep your torso safe, and that's how you drive forward and stay. A lot of people say that the whole defanging the snake. That's a connotation for counteroffense or behind time. That means we're being attacked. No, it's an offensive attack method, and that's why you're actually driving on the half diamond into the forward triangle, reverse triangle into the forward triangle, which is a half diamond. And on the diagonal attacks, you're learning forehands to the left, backhands to the right. That's the way that the system is initially drilled. So you're attacking forward on Tercio Largo first, and then you're driving into the forward triangle into Tercio Corto. So, but now you're maneuvering. Now you're using the second method of fighting. The second strategy is maneuver, because now you're no longer going direct contact to contact into the space and trying to displace your opponent. Now you're maneuvering around. So again, it's showcasing exactly the way that a combative system is supposed to be taught. Power-based first. And you'll see this same principle taught in many of the European systems. They'll say by force, by judgment, and by falsings. Which is deception. That's De Grassi, actually, the Italian. He says three things: by force, by judgment, which means maneuver, and because you're now maneuvering around your opponent, and then through them, and then falsing. So same thing. A different culture, same conclusion, and same method. So that's what you're doing with Tercio Largo, but again, it becomes an attack system, and that's. You can see what's happening. So we start extreme close quarter with Daca Bipugno, a little closer with Tercio Corto, and then ranging it out Tercio Largo. Yeah. But you fight obviously in reverse. The reason why is because if you that method works. If you can strike close quarter, then you can strike someone at long range. But the opposite is not correct and is not effective. If you only know long range striking, you have no idea of the energy required to not eat your own weapon and be hit by your opponent when they come in and try and strike at you close quarter. So that's the reason why close quarter is taught and why it's power based, because you absolutely need that ability to protect yourself. So it works in the proper, it's actually set up in reverse, close quarter, ranging out, but of course in the fight you fight long range in the close quarter. And just like Ferd was saying, medium range, sometimes you'll hear Grand Tuan's guys say medium range according to our ranging system, like 90. But again, it's identified simply because it's not in our methodology and it's not part of our technique. So we don't recognize that, and we certainly don't fight there. That's when you're going to be moving in and out of that range. You're in the bridging range. If your opponent stops and you're there, then if they're not moving out and displacing anymore, then what are you going to do? Well, you're going to step back into the range and that you can actually strike them, and you'll strike them accordingly. Just because you have to step back and adjust your distance of your strike doesn't mean that you're getting out. That just means you've quartered your opponent. They're not moving anymore. Exactly. So, but it's very important. Very important understanding. There's no medium range. Not if you want to stay safe.
And we have to identify the medium range, because then that's how we know
where to stay out of.
Well, that's how we know where's long range and where is close range, right? Like we have to somehow identify that threshold that we can say we need to cross in order to be in one range or another.
I'm sure you know
Obviously,
there's some systems that they advocate that. They say, yeah, this is medium range. Some systems they say they specialize in that, you know.
Yeah, there are styles that kind of capitalizes more on kind of
yeah, I think
stand your ground type of fighting, like
it's gonna be more. It's gonna be more stick based though. It has.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
precisely.
yeah, I guess like for instance, you know, my friends in Bahala na multi-style, that's what they adopt. I forget what it's called, but they have this whole thing about, you know, like I said, like standing your ground and being able to duke it out with your opponent, because apparently this is something that Leo Garon experienced as a.
I remember hearing those guys because of the terrain, and there was
the terrain, and you know, like they had to deal with you know, charging Japanese with bayonets they have, or their bolos, and basically it's like, you know, like their best fighter is at the, you know,
the apex of the triangle.
Yeah. And then basically all the ones that survived the first strikes.
The backup guys are cleaning them up.
Yeah. You know, but they weren't utilizing, you know, like maneuvering footwork.
No, very defando, very anchored. You know.
Yeah, I don't know the terminology. We had a guest one time come to one of my
definitely anchored
gatherings.
I remember. You know.
Yeah, but you know, I understood like that's how they, you know, that's how they did things, and that's how Leo Garon fought, and so that's what he's teaching, right? But so yeah, they have a whole obviously series of drills where they have to be able to develop that ability to, you know, stand toe to toe with somebody, and right, and you know. You know, attack until somebody's weapon, right? With us, we're more like, you know, I don't want to lose the edge of my weapon, so I'm going to go around and dart in and out, and you know, I'm going to jump behind the bushes, and I'm going to come back on the other side.
Yeah, it was definitely it was definitely terrain, definitely related. But hey, guys, here just we're at 20 after. I mean, time flies when you're, you know, when you get your
no doubt.
Where we at?
So what we got? So Tuan Tim, because I want to definitely get to Contradas before it gets Tuan Tim, method 7 and 8.
So actually, 7, 8, and 9 actually go together. So Tercio Largo, Tercio Corto are grouped together simply because they're both diagonal and horizontal attacks, long range, close quarter. And these are taught equal timing, and then you learn how to apply them obviously all ahead of timing. Then you get into, so that's half of the Doce Methdos system, and you know, that you can fight effectively now that you have the ability to bridge long range and a quarter. And if you have diagonal attacks, you can fight effectively. Like I said, the 5-attack system of my father-in-law, this guerrilla unit, very simple: 2 diagonals, a horizontal forehand, and then a vertical, and then thrust. And so again, those systems can be effective in a very in a concise format like that. So 7, 8, and 9 are now ahead of timing. You have to be ahead of timing because these are advanced manipulations. So now when you're fighting somebody, you know, obviously more skilled, then you're going to need this. So, and it's very interesting. So this also goes into advanced maneuvers. So the panastason kete / thrust, when you're facing your opponent, this goes around to the outside. The clock system, which are the watiks, flat of the blade, generally you make a contact first, and then you manipulate around the contact weapon. So now you're at the center line, regardless of the diagonal attack or whatever the contact is. And then look at florete, which is our, again, double circular attacks, which is different than some systems, doblete. We use the top edge of the blade, of the top edge, sharpened edge of the ginunting, to strike actually with the first cut of the florete, and then the long edge on the second. So that is coming from the inside of the strike. 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, and 4 to 4. So again, and all of these are progressive because they're actually at a little bit more longer distance extension as well. So Yeah, these are all the three methods, and then that's the final, if you will, the attack methods of the sword. And there's some other methods, like in 7. There's what we call the largo sonquete, which is a straight line thrust, a finishing thrust to the bridge of the eyes, and sometimes in the hand, could be to the to the chest as well. And that's part shown in the form. And but again, so those methods are there. But if you look at it again, going back to because I was I'm fascinated by this, because when you look at it, Paquita's and most effective systems. So Paquita is based upon true body mechanics, because it's based upon and built upon how humans fight with bladed weapons. No animals, elements, mythology, anything like that. Those could be effective, but from the human perspective, you can't get any more effective than that. Full range of body mechanics, functionally correct. In other words, we teach how to utilize the weapon strike with it. Full range of motion, not any type of stylistic type of approach, but full range of motion. So it's interesting. You everybody be like, oh, you always chamber full. Well, of course, this is full range of motion. So if you want full power and full protection, then you're going to go to full.
Dipping the point, right? Gotcha.
So, but we can strike from any range and from any position within the arc if you have that understanding of body mechanics. And that's the first one. Second is based upon mathematical geometry, because this is why we are using the weapon, right? I mean, we're measuring distance and time with the weapon. That's why the weapon is effective. And if you look at martial arts today, if you ask people, like, how do you teach timing? Well, a lot of people don't know. I mean, most martial artists don't know how to teach timing. You can't teach timing empty-handed, because you can't punch a punch. The only way to correctly teach timing is with equal timing, which is weapon to weapon. Weapon to weapon can strike. You can have equal timing with a weapon. Day 1, minute 1, you can start teaching somebody striking mechanics and equal timing. From there, then they can learn behind and head without being what? Without being hit. Okay, how many times do I need to hit you for you to see that you're behind time, right? Or I mean, that's, I mean, a lot of what people say, what? Oh, well, it's instinctive, it's through repetition. No, I mean, there's a fundamental way. When you have a weapon, you can teach timing effectively, safely, and expeditiously as well. I mean, immediately. And that's, again, the value of the weapon. But again, when you're looking at, we're using specific angulars of movement on the footwork and on the striking, because this is the judgment skills of range and timing. And then the last is real tactics. I mean, war fighting tactics. Fighting is fighting. The fundamental of understanding is that there's 3 factors of combat: how you strike, how you move, and the terrain. Because, like you were talking about the terrain earlier, that's right. The terrain dictates what? Where you can move, and that dictates how you decide to eventually maneuver against your opponent. If if you only have a linear line of attack and movement, you're going to have to go that way. I mean, no choice. If you can't break contact and get out. So, but that's it. There's no, and that's, we've always been known, and Grant Tilton's always, you've heard him say, there's no blocks and there's no stances and there's no defense, because the only way that you protect yourself is actually by offensive striking. You strike and you move. It's who's ahead of time and who's behind time is really what's deciding who's dominating that combat. So, and if you're defending is for what? Defending is for actually defending a space, a terrain. It's not for defending yourself, because you can defend against a strike, but you're not doing anything against the attacker or the attacking system. Yeah, fundamental. I mean, everybody knows this. I mean, and so but again, you wouldn't get this in a lot of different martial arts training, regardless. I mean, worldwide, right? When you're taught technique and you're taught from the counter-offense perspective, that's your reality. I mean, that's how you think. Engagements take place and how you build an effective skill. And it's based upon how you strike and how you move, because that's not only, it's both how you protect yourself and how you engage your opponent. So
wow, awesome.
But that's the methods. Those 7, 8, 9 are advanced ahead of time, and again, once you're there, now you actually have every way that the human body can manipulate that weapon. Every part is striking. Every part, top edge, back edge, long edge, the flat of the blade, the whole back of the blade, the quarter horizontal, everything. Every way that you can manipulate that weapon. So,
yeah,
so
and basically just to, yeah.
So what do you got for just because I want to make sure we get to Contradas? What do you got?
Yeah, I was just gonna finish off the rest. So Tim already talked about Orasan, Florete, Pasasankete, sorry. Obviously people probably, in case people don't know, our Wittig system, we refer to it as the clock system because it mimics the face of the clock. Other styles call it abanico, the fan strikes. Because the way the weapon moves, it's like a fan, right? But we refer to it as a clock system. Florete, Chiquete, Tim already talked about the flourishing strikes and the indirect thrusting method, the Echiquetes. After that, we have 10 and 11, which is Pikiri Disarma. And yeah, so it's just the disarming system, and then finally Pikiri. So Pikiri just means extreme close. In Tagalog, they'll say it's dikit or pangdikit. That literally means you're so close you're sticking to each other. But we refer to it as Pikiri. This is where you see the principle of Sagang Labo comes out. The ever popular Hubad Lubad drills.
Okay, yeah.
We technically don't have Hubad Lubad. We just have the Sagang Labo and the slapping hand, or because we treat it as a strike. It's not a it's not a block, and then you
parry. You guys are
parry pass. If I put my forearm up, it's going to hit something.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hit it offensively. So that's how we're taught, to use Pikiri / And then finally, 12 is the aforementioned Sigidas.
The Sigidas.
So, it's a series. It's, I believe there are 3 sets, right, Tim?
3 sets of 12.
3 sets of 12, about 12 attacks in each one. And then that pretty much rounds out the Pasugat side, the force on force contact side of weapon interaction in Pikiri Tersa. And then that takes us to the next one that you wanted to cover, which is the Contrada system in Pasunod.
Yeah, I got a bid from you actually that I want to show.
For me?
Okay. Yeah.
I have something useful to show.
I thought it was useful. I thought so. We're going to check it out right now. I'm going to pull it up.
All right.
And, you're actually talking about Contradas.
So, okay. From class, I think, right?
If I had to guess, it looked like it, yeah. So there's going to be a slight echo, guys. I can't help that because everybody's got their mic.
That's it. Yeah.
So that's just the way it goes.
Any questions on your basic design, right? So you're doing this out of our factory, right? So Paul, since I'm closest to you.
You'll hear me laugh a lot because I'm I like to keep things light.
There's no echo now. That's good. Okay.
A little bit.
Hopefully it shows your partner changed the energy, right? You were already going forward, and you said just to don't try to adjust because he made a.
Yeah. So while it's playing, I'll try to explain because the audio is not great, even when I filmed it.
Yeah, I figured I would show it, and then you could definitely speak on it.
Yeah, I'm introducing this particular student to what we call the contact Contradas flow.
reverse this one to after this.
How long is this video? I forget.
It's not, it's almost done. I can shut. I mean, if you want to talk on it now, I can close it out.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure how long it is.
I think it's like about 30 more seconds.
It's hard to see what are you showing in the.
Sorry?
It's kind of small on my end. I can barely see it. Actually.
Yeah, I'm showing Paul there. His name is Paul. How to break into the 2-to-1 Contradas from 5 attacks.
I'm gonna close it out here. You could speak on it.
Yeah. So that's one of those very common drills you'll often see us perform. Is a combination of the fluid 5 attacks drill and a basic Contradas principle. In that case, what you're looking at is the angle 2 versus the angle 1 Contradas. And in that video, I was introducing it to that student how to go from one principle to the other. So we started off, like I said, 5 attacks, and as you saw, we were doing it like, super kind of, I'd say casual, like we're in the medium range. We're doing it slowly because if I threw in like the whole explosive bridging and everything, he would just like lose his mind, right? So in that particular video, I'm trying to show him how to meet equal time on 4 angles and then changing the energy of the 4th strike. So when he does the broken, what we call the broken angle 4, and his partner goes fluid, he ends up back on the angle 1 position, which he will then attack with his Contradas number 2. And then the flow goes like that. So basically, that's what it is. That's how we would introduce the principle of Contradas.
Okay.
And again, you notice how we're moving around a lot, even though it's like slow and kind of chill. We didn't just stand in front of each other and just, do this pivoting in place. Right, because you don't get anything from that. So I'm forcing him to move his feet. So right from the get-go, he understands that he needs to get out of the way, because he is answering a forehand strike of some kind, a high line forehand strike with a backhand strike. So he can't very well be, within the path of that, within the path of this strike. So he needs to be able to displace himself outside and attack it from the outside, right? Obviously, as he gets better, I'm gonna, I'll start adding other things like, actually bridging from largo to corto, speeding it up a little, putting more pressure behind the strikes. I do that with some students where if I feel that they're just simply tapping the stick, I will actually I'll leave my weapon there and watch if they bounce or they stop because they hesitated, and then I will kind of show them what happens if you don't commit.
So we, like Ferd's explaining, we kind of jump the traditional method and teach a combination of this as soon as possible because you need this understanding for the totality of fighting. If you look at it, sometimes with beginners, if you know how to do a broken strike and a fluid, well, if you attack with a broken, but then they go fluid, now you're on the Contrada's flow, right? Now the weapons are on the same side. But if you don't understand how this relationship of the weapons has to be and has to take place and engage or not engage, then, you could easily run in and destroy each other. And that happens if you don't understand this. So, if you use this symbology here, we use the entire diamond. The system starts with 1 and 2, and it ends with 1 and 2.
Okay.
So when we tell you that, yes, many FMA grandmasters say, "I'll teach you 1 and 2. You can fight any style, any angle, right?" Well, some systems have that, and this system, Pikiti, has that specifically because that's actually the objective of the system. And it is traditionally after you've finished the Doce Methdos. So if you start with the bottom of the reverse triangle with nothing, now at Doce Methdos, and once you finish Seguidas, and now you're starting the Contradas. Contradas is it's an advanced method. It takes time to recognize this flow, because what happens is you always want to switch back to contact because you feel safer that way, meeting the strike than flowing with it. But again, there's a huge advantage to this method, and it is very again, it works. So now you're working up to the top of the half diamond, and therefore it means that there's actually less striking and less interaction. You're much more precise in your engagements. And again, it's a blade fighting system because you are going to go to the hand first and directly, because you understand the precision. And it's 3 different striking categories: contradas, recontras, recontradas, and those have different angular methods to it, but they all serve a purpose and all progressive. And but what it comes down to is that once you know the system, you can destroy any angle with a 1 and 2. And if your precision is correct on both striking and footwork. So again, you know, an intermediate student is not going to be able to do this very effectively because they simply don't have the mechanical control and the mastery of the strike yet. But so the biggest differentiator, the biggest identifier is that now you're flowing on the same side of the center line, and it takes some time to get familiar with this and to learn how to flow with it, because the advantage is that so you no longer have to protect yourself with a strike in order to move into close quarter. Once you follow with that, and that weapon crosses the center line, then they are open until they finish the chamber on the other side. So again, that's one of the advantages of it. But it's a very particular set of 3 counter-offense drills and then 3 offensive drills, and then they're combined together. So it becomes contact, it goes to contradas, and then goes back to contact, which could be, you know, I mean, the majority of the time you're going to engage on a 1-to-1, you know, on a contact strike to a contact strike. I mean, that's human nature. Though a lot of people ask me, how do you teach 5 attacks? I said, in order, because number 1 is the best strike you can execute. 1's better than 2. 2, you know, doesn't have much the power or the range that number 1 does. So, you know, that's again, you know, that's another indicator of the effectiveness of the system. So, but when you understand this, you know, it's going to end. It's going to start on contact. You can switch it into contradas and then back into contact. And again, once so in reality, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. When you finish these 2 systems, you no longer think about patterns. You're simply flowing in and out of the attack and controlling your striking end, range, and timing. And you have a much more complete skill set than what it would actually look like if you just totaled the the sequence of the drills and so forth. Because again, you're learning how to switch and control this flow from one to the other. And this is the totality of, again, the totality of striking. Doesn't matter even empty hands. I mean, you know, either you're engaging with some type of contact either on the same side of the center line or opposing it forehand to forehand, backhand to backhand. So
wow.
Yeah, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to visualize it, but for instance,
no, I think you guys are both explaining it well.
And again, what you're just watching is kind of that's like the beginner level of the drill.
But I want the folks to see something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, sure. Because I have other videos. I don't know if I uploaded it because with my group back in the Bay Area, who are obviously much further along, you can see a version of that drill like very. I mean, we're moving very fast. The exchanges are very fast, and you can clearly see that when the sticks meet, you know, the offensive partner is clearly trying to drive that strike towards their head, and then the other one is trying to act proactively protect himself with his own strike. But then he will attempt to, you know, either you know, get ahead in timing by speeding up his follow through, or simply just meet it. But you don't see those little nuances obviously with the beginners, right? Because again, you got to go easy with them first. But, done correctly, as Tim said, you can pretty much, you can improve. You can see improvement in the practitioner's proficiency pretty quickly because, again, everything is, pretty much already set for you. You just have to go through and do the drills, right? Everything that you're supposed to do, just do that proper, and you can kind of basically see, how quickly you progress through that drill alone.
I got a question in from Tom for both of you. And his question is, how do each of you, I'm just here, yeah, for both. Okay, I just want to make sure. How have each of you evolved the Doce Methdos and the Contrada series since learning it?
How did we evolve?
If so, his question is, how did each of you evolve both systems since learning it?
See, that's if I'll credit Simon Burgess for this. We've discussed this many times, and you'll hear a lot of this. I don't know if this is exactly what the point he's trying to make or not, but systems don't evolve. People evolve. You get better. You train the system, and you master the system, and there's no plateau. There's no ending. I mean, again, the human dimension of fighting is that we're not going to step in the same distance every time. The strike is not going to be at the same speed every time. So therefore, whatever system you're using, of course, has to compensate for that. And the only way to do that is to control that. You have to control the fight, control the distance, control the timing, and control the engagement with the weapon, either meeting it or manipulating around it. So, again, and unfortunately, this is what you see in today's world. I can assure you, people today are not smart enough to think that they can make up their own system or whatever on a bladed weapon system because, it took a lot of lives to perfect this and to put this into proper order. That's why I said that when I looked for this system, I'm going to find one that's in existence because I don't need to, people who assume that, they're going to evolve the system. No, these systems were effective because they stayed in the same structure that they are today. And why would you think that you can evolve them? No, you will evolve. You're made better by the system. I mean, regardless of whatever system it is. It doesn't have to be, as sophisticated or have as many techniques or strikes or whatever. If you know how to train and you have the objective of winning the fight, because again, it's all about range, timing, pattern recognition. I mean, does your system allow you to control that? If not, I don't, then you have to deal with that. And you don't evolve the system. The system is perfected. Yeah, the system is perfected. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I'm not going to be teaching anything professionally that I haven't validated 100%, and
or
that
flaws.
I teach as well. So, but it's very interesting, And again, this is the value of Filipino martial arts is that people think that it's funny. Sometimes you hear the comment, "Well, I don't see any sword fighting going on today, so that doesn't matter." Like, really? There's plenty of sword fighting going on. There's plenty of use of the sword going on. The sword hasn't gone away anywhere. The understanding of the effectiveness has been lost, even by the military. After World War II, the cavalry saber went away because the horse went away. So when that happened, the military actually lost the understanding of how effective the sword is to teach body mechanics, to teach, as what General Patton said. He said, don't take the sword and the bayonet away because it's the only thing that will make men close. That is what makes men close the distance when you have the sword and the bayonet, because you know that you have the capability to kill your enemy, and close with that assurance, other than just with your rifle or pistol. it's, you know, one of the best comments I've probably ever had given is I was training some Army units that were about to deploy. This is several years ago, but one of the guys came up to me after the first day. He said, you know, this is what I joined the Army for, right here. You know, because now I have the full confidence that I can, you know, actually execute my job and actually engage in combat and live. Because I have this full understanding, and that's exactly what John Patton said. And but again, I mean, unfortunately, in our culture, and this is worldwide, don't appreciate the skill set and the enhancement of everything physical that you do and intellectually through weaponry and through the sword. I mean, the sword is just as powerful and will remain just as powerful now today. And if you have an effective system, you know, that teaches you effectively and that you can train effectively and validate it in sparring.
Okay, Chase, well answered. I have another question from same person. Let's start. Guro Ferd. Has your understanding of PTK evolved since being exposed to the Tri-V formula?
Well, actually, I started with Tri-V, like I already said earlier. So by training in primarily Doce Methdos, I'm able to identify a lot of the principles within Tri-V. You know, in Tri-V, they have a tendency to kind of combine several different principles into like a module of drills. I'm probably using that term incorrectly, but you know, again, if you have no exposure to the foundation system, you would not know what all these, you know, where all these combinations of strikes came from. So yeah, in a major way, you know, when I look at Tri-V now, I may not know what that drill is called or that series of combination, but I can identify, oh, you know, when he goes, you know, from like an angle two into a thrust, I recognize that as the Contrada's entry to the Kopi Puño. They might not call it that though. That's just how I identify it, because as you've seen in that video, that's you know, we're practicing Contradas. You'll see a lot of the same angles being used as a way to break into that other, whatever that next flow is, or that other flow, right? So I guess you could say that's how I guess my evolution of understanding is going. Is I'm able to, I can see kind of the same principles on both sides and understand how they connect, even though I don't really train Tri-V currently. I've taken some classes, some Zoom classes specifically with different instructors, just so that I can, you know, again, see the similarities and kind of draw the, you know, kind of the correlation between like how this particular form or principles being applied in Tri-V versus Doce Methdos. That makes sense.
No. Yeah. There was 2 questions from Tom. And anything, did you, I'm going to show another, I just got your message regarding the vid. So did you, on that last question, when I pull up the vid, Tuan, Tim, did you want to add anything?
Well, I have to be honest here. You know, Tri-V is not the system of Bikini. So if you don't understand the history, and you know, most people don't, but all I can tell you is that I am the one person that had the most training time with Grand Tuan in the system throughout the whole entire history, and you know, he's like a father to me, actually, and truly like a father. He's given me, you know, the most valuable possession that I have, which is the knowledge of this system. And it's brought me success in every aspect of my life. And, of course, I'm eternally grateful for that. And I've been with him and know him like no other person does. And I committed to the system. That's why I think that I was, that's why he trusted me in order to be able to study this and to be able to teach this accordingly. But I couldn't. I'm not going to tell you that something is the same or as same as effective when it's not. But if I can just give a shameless plug here, my website's been down for a long time for a lot of reasons, but I'll be opening this soon, and you'll be able to see there a huge volume of video of Grand Tuan executing the real PTK system, in the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s, and there won't be any Tri-V there. I can assure you that. And but you'll be able to learn from him, to study from him, from that video. I still do that, all the time. And Ferd will talk about this. The senior instructors that train me, and because you don't imitate the Grandmaster, you learn the system, but you don't study him to imitate him. You study the depth of the system and the depth of his instruction. And of course, he is the best model to observe because he's certainly perfected all of the mechanics and the whole system as well. But that'll be available. You'll be able to see the system, its totality, and this is what PTK was. That's how our reputation was made. With all of the different work that Grand Tuan done with law enforcement. I mean, he was certainly the most recognized Filipino martial artist within the law enforcement training community, and a lot of other things as well. But that's all done based upon the system as we teach it. And again, I'm committed to that. I'm committed to giving people the skill set to live a long life, and like as our philosophy says, life, health, and success.
All right.
And if I may just add something, just to be clear, right, for people who are watching, listening, whatever, we're not making claims that Doce Methdos is like automatically like the best or whatever. Like, you have to put in the work to in training it. I mean, really, like, you have to put in the work, whatever system you choose, right? Because there are like you guys have seen what we can do with Doce Methdos, but not trying to put anyone down, but you can see other groups or individuals that are also training Doce Methdos that are not as effective because there's missing information there, right? That they didn't care to learn about or try to resolve, right? So we're not claiming that Doce Methdos beats whatever other methodologies. Is really it comes down to the training method. Okay, obviously if you have a knowledgeable instructor that can teach you right, then you will be effective, right? I don't know if we've had this conversation. I had this conversation with other people. Like, everybody tends to seem to follow the trend of, well, this is my expression, right? Your expression does not make it a system, right? That's just how you interpret things, right? I'm an animator, so I have my own expression of doing things too, but that it's usually because of the art direction. It needs to be expressed this way, so we need to do the work in this manner, right? I didn't just like come up with like, well, this is my style and this is how I understand things, right? That's why it's called a system, right? Systems are based on solid principles, not interpretation. So as Tim said, if you have an effective system, ultimately we're all gonna reach the same conclusion because, right, that's the scientific method. If there are discrepancies or whatever, then you find out the solution to that, right? So yeah, it's just I chose this path. I did, because I've been asked so many times, like, how come you train with Tim more than Grand Tuhon or whoever? I'm like, well, for one thing, Grand Tuhon's in the Philippines and Tim is here.
Logistics.
Like I said, we were training with other instructors before Tim. It's just that, Tim, I guess it's just, we were just fortunate that Tim happened to be at the time making the rounds, and that's how we got our introduction to him. And, again, the way he taught Pikiti Tertia is not like, it's not based on a lot of like what ifs, or what if this guy does this, oh, then I'm going to do this. He didn't try to sell me on the effectiveness of the system. Like, oh, it's a good thing you're training Pikiti Tertia because, we're the best. You just basically this is how you deliver your attack, and this is, why you would do that, so, and this is how we're going to train this. There were not a lot of proclamations about this technique is more effective than the other and blah, blah. If there were, then it's like, this technique is effective because, and if you cannot do this aspect of that technique, then that technique will fail, right? Like the footwork, for instance, right? You see a lot of explosive footwork happening. If you don't have the, aerobic conditioning to be able to do that continuously, you're gonna gas out. So what do? Well, you need to work on your anaerobic and aerobic conditioning, right? Or you can just choose and stand and tap, do what you like, I guess, But the thing is, it's, we do things a specific way for specific reasons.
So that in this video, that it's actually a old interview that from this old black belt. I have clips of it on my YouTube channel, but the Grand Tuhon says, I don't claim to be the best, but I know how to teach the technique.
The old one, yeah.
So of course, and that's what Grand Tuhon is known for. I mean, he's a master instructor. He can teach anybody, and Pikiti had a solid reputation because we were moving and striking with authority. And again, so it's we've talked a lot about the particular system of Pikiti, and but again, like I was talking about last night, from here, we could have a whole another entire conversation on the shared training methods, because really all martial art is the same, right? I mean, the particular methods, like how do you execute broken rhythm, which is critical to being an effective fighter. If you're going to assume you're always fighting somebody who knows how to fight, which is a tenet of the Pikiti system. We're not training to fight someone who doesn't understand. We're training to fight against someone who knows and understands how to fight, and not just our method as well. A lot of systems, unfortunately, you see them doing what? Well, they only train against each other doing the same mechanics in that particular method instead of a more holistic approach. And this used to be, I mean, before you always cross-train. You always wanted to train with other individuals because you needed that experience, and that's why you don't mimic the mechanics of the teacher. You allow the system to train you appropriately, and that's going to be the basis for effectiveness. But we could carry the conversation on later to again, the training methods, or what are the shared training methods? I mean, because again, it has to come down to range, timing, and pattern recognition. If you can't control those, if you don't have the methods to do that, to turn it from counter-offense into offense, what we call, because the objective is to what you call offensive. You're attacking the attack, but that's a progression of training that's very systematic, and we can take everybody there, and that's the objective for everybody, for all martial arts. So
yeah,
that's interesting to me. That's what I enjoy doing.
No, we could do if you guys are up for it. I kind of figured there's gonna be like 6 or 7 episodes for this theme. Give everybody a chance. So if you guys want to do a part 2 on that, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, anytime.
It'd probably be realistically. Would June work for you guys?
We have
we'll have to double check, see where I'm at during that time. But yeah, anytime. Yeah,
we have instructor camps on the first weekend of June, I believe, right, Tim?
Yeah, actually, we'll be in New Orleans, first week of June right now. But other than that, we'll be available.
I can be second. Yeah, I mean, so let's do that.
Yeah, but yeah, we're talking about all these things, like the foundation system and the tactics, the strategy, and whatnot, and then ultimately, right, there's the one component that everybody seems to love talk about is the sparring, right? Like when we spar, we have to put these principles to work and actually pull them off in sparring, like meaning whatever attacks or strikes we're doing like in the drill, that needs to carry over to sparring, regardless whether we're sparring with sticks or with blades, training blades. We don't, like, our standard is not, okay, you train things a certain way, and then when it comes to sparring, you're back to just caveman style fighting, just bashing each other, right? I mean, that's how you want to fight, then great, but you don't really need to train Pikiti Tertia if that's how you're going to fight anyway, right? Because there's a lot of lessons being taught that you're just throwing out the window because, right?
Don't need to train on anything if you're going to do that.
Yeah, right. Just develop really tough skin and a hard head, and you're good to go.
Yeah. So let's do that then. Yeah, I got it down for June. It really doesn't matter whether it's second, third week, fourth week, really, whatever's kind of convenient for you guys, I can make work. So let's do that. I'll have you guys back, but this has been fantastic. This 2 hours.
And I'll prepare some video showing some training methods, how we do things, and carry the conversation forward because again, I mean, I'm always researching, I'm always reading, looking at source material, and then when I travel, I try and actually a lot of people don't know that, but I was really good friends with Tony Diego from Cali Illustrissimo, because my student in the Philippines, Rolf Carpio, they were best friends. They used to actually, he was a veterinarian, and so him and Tony were best friends, and they raised fighting cocks together, and but we had a lot of conversations, just the three of us actually, and but I knew him well, and yeah, he was a really good guy, and he was truly the the inheritor of the system, and he was the real deal. That's for sure. He was a real deal, and I had a lot of good times. A lot of good times with Tony there in the Philippines.
I appreciate you both coming on. This was super. I mean, I don't know. I lost track of the comments, to be honest with you. They were coming flooded in, but this is going to be a big hit. So what I do is I download it, and then what I'll do is I'll share it to both your guys' walls, and you guys can share it, wherever you want, your groups and all that. But and I'll have that, I'll have that done tonight. But this is fantastic. I learned, quite a bit on the Doce Methdos, and I'm sure folks that were watching did, and that's the whole point of this. So, not only give PTK more exposure, but for those who perhaps didn't really understand what some of the stuff is and all that. And I think you guys did it very well. I think you guys.
We kind of had to go fast. I mean, there's a lot of missing.
Yeah, but I think that's why we should do a part 2.
Cover everything in 2 hours.
But that's why we should do a part 2. You guys can kind of maybe fill in some of the blanks that we can get to, and then we can talk about some of the other stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like Pikiti Tertia is such a vast system, but it's finite, but it's a vast system. And Tim had told us in the beginning, like, there's never going to be a book big enough to contain everything. Anybody can have a thick ass book, but it's like, okay, what I mean, how much of that is actually useful, or are you just filling pages, right? Even our, even our book, right? Tim, our student handbooks, they're not that thick. I mean, it grows over time because Tim would distribute new documents and training instructions or whatever, right? Just additional documentation to help us understand our training and the system better. Or we'll have some reading materials so that next time we see him, we know what to ask him.
You use it until you don't need it, then you throw it away. Once you throw your notes away,
I don't throw it away. I keep
now,
it's like it's
now you know the system. But
like
you still need
I've
them.
actually split my binder now. I have the I have the documentation handouts, and then like I have like my notes. Because before they were like combined together. Because I'll be like, I was a note taker too when I was first training with Tim. Because I'm able to retain information better that way versus just pointing the camera at him. I noticed that when I did that for a while, and I noticed that, I had the camera trained on Tim on the whole time, and then he goes, "Okay, let's work," and I put it down. I'm like, "The hell were we doing?" Because it's just like, I don't know, this is weird disconnect. But if I was writing notes down, it's like, okay, when it's time to go, get physical, for some reason I can just do it. So yeah, I got like a binder of just notes and then a binder of documentation.
But, we appreciate it, Dean. Thanks for having this. Good time.
Yeah. I'm glad this was able to happen. It sounds like it was way overdue as far as getting you on here. So part 2, folks, if you're watching, it's definitely going to happen. Looks like it's going to happen in June. So yeah, I'll be in touch with Guro Ferd, and we'll coordinate, get it going, and get you inclusive as far as what's works for dates and all that. But again, I thought you guys articulated well, and I thought it was fantastic. Thanks again for coming on, and
thank you.
Until next time.
Yeah, thank you to everybody who tuned in and watched.
There were a lot, yeah. But you guys take care.
Appreciate it, man. Good night. Have a good one.
Take care. I'll chat with you later.
Right on. Absolutely. I gotcha. All right. Wow. That was a good one. So raffle Sunday night. We're raffling all those donated a lot of books, lessons, a few other things. Brian donating a WeCAF helmet. And that's going to be around 6 p.m. We're raffling that stuff off Sunday night. Again, that's for the Ukrainian refugees. So there's still time to buy tickets, $10 a ticket. So if that's of interest, you can go to FMA discussions on the pinned post and check it out and all that. So I'm trying to think of anything else regarding raffle. I think that's it. Who's next? I believe Saturday night, possibly Greg Mason. Martin, I believe. I'm going to finalize that though, but you'll see. You guys will see the flyer all over the place. So at any rate, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for all that jumped in, commented, questions, the whole 9 yards. All right, that was a good, long one, but a good one. All right, folks. Good night.